Alrighty, everybody, welcome to tonight's episode of In the End Zone. As always, Kevin Drake with Michael Washington Weeks.
How we doing? How we doing?
And we have a special guest tonight in Mr. John Turner, our White Walker.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
You've been nicknamed that, John, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that is your nickname on the show on Sundays. But, yeah, we have John on tonight. He's going to talk with us everything NFL tonight. Kind of want to start off somewhere like we talk about these rookies and everything. We've had our draft specials, but I'm looking at it. You have Dwayne Haskins being like fantasy odds, like how he'll go, and then you have the offensive coordinator in New York telling us that Daniel Jones could start day one. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what these rookies, which ones do you think, other than outside of Dwayne Haskins and Daniel Jones, who do y'all think is going to be the bigger impact on their team?
Well, I mean, you got to look at Kyler Murray in Arizona. You know, they don't really have anybody, worth much behind him. This whole Cliff Kingsbury saying, we'll see if Kyler Murray starts week one, and then the GM, Steve Keim, coming out and saying, Kyler Murray will be our starter. It already looks like the GM and the head coach are at odds with each other, but Cliff Kingsbury is just kind of, I don't know if it's just to add an aurora of mystique around who could possibly start in Arizona. But I think when you trade a guy like Josh Rosen and then you draft a guy like Kyler Murray, I think Murray is the legit starter. As far as the New York head coach is concerned, and Pat Shermer in this whole Daniel Jones, or the offensive coordinator, and Daniel Jones could start week one, that's coach speak. That's what we like to call just somebody trying to hype up a player or a prospect on their team to either get the trade market going or to make sure you don't have your GM look like a total idiot. As Dave Gettleman has caught a lot of heat for the Daniel Jones pick at 6. I think Haskins is the clear-cut starter in Washington. As much as I like Colt McCoy, he's just not effective enough, and you don't spend a first-round pick, especially a top 15 pick, if you're not going to, unless you have like a guy like Drew Brees in front of him, you have to start a guy like Haskins.
True. And I think the one thing coming out of the draft and like before that with Dwayne Haskins being picked is everyone wondering what was going to happen with Alex Smith with his surgery. And even when he went down, was it Joe Theismann or who was the quarterback that ended up tweeting, but like, I had an injury like that?
Joe Theismann on the same day, actually. It was the same day. John, how many years? What was it? 24 years?
That happened in
to the day.
That happened in '85, I believe.
So that was what, 23 years to the day or something like that? 33 years to the day or something like that?
Yeah, okay, it gets weirder. It happened on the same yard line of the field. The game ended in the same score.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
Everything
whole
just matched
thing.
up perfectly with that.
And they're saying that Alex Smith may not come back. They're saying that his career might be over, which was what it was for Theismann.
It was meant to be.
Yep.
I mean, with everything he went through in San Francisco, taking him to the playoffs and then traded to the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs make it to the playoffs but not being able to make it to the Super Bowl, then getting traded to the Redskins and having a better opportunity at being able to put up a lot of stats, and then he goes down like that. I mean, he's been through a lot in his career, and if he is able to come back and play a couple of games, all the respect to him. But like Joe Theismann, I just don't think it happens.
Well, I think that one of the biggest things with Alex Smith is this is a guy that went through 6 different offensive coordinators in his first 7 years. Never really got a chance to, really get a chance to settle in with the same type of offensive system. He had, I think it was like 5 different head coaches in that first 7 years. He never really got an opportunity and chance to kind of like sit in, where you take a look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who sat behind, Brett Favre for 4 years, and that coaching staff very rarely turned over. A lot of that verbiage was the same throughout, Aaron Rodgers' first half of his career. So Rodgers went to a more stable position where Alex Smith didn't. So I think that you look at a guy like Alex Smith, and then he went to Washington. There were some good hopes for Washington, but Smith is a game manager because he's never really got a chance to be able to settle into an offense. You know, he opened up a little bit in Kansas City, but he had been there for a little while underneath Andy Reid. He goes to a new system, so he reverts back to his old ways of just kind of playing that safety net. So as much as I would love to see Alex Smith get back on the field and play, the likelihood of him being a starter in the NFL or to even have a career at this point is probably over, which is unfortunate because I think he's had actually a very good career considering the adversity that he's faced, at least in the coaching side of things.
Oh, definitely. Alex Smith is one of those consistent players that everyone was like, yeah, he's a good quarterback, not a great one, but he can possibly win you a championship. He was mobile enough to get out of the pocket and run and get a few yards down the field and maybe even a first down. And his arm talent, even though it wasn't the greatest, he's able to make a lot of the better throws that not many people can, like Case Keenum and Colt McCoy can. He could. And I think that's what really changed it for him, and that's why he was able to go from a place like San Francisco and go to Kansas City, and then Kansas City to Washington, which I find it funny. He literally went from west, central, east.
Well, I think the other thing that's great about Alex Smith, though, too, or the thing with Alex Smith is he went to Andy Reid. I mean, we got to talk about Andy Reid here. We got to give Andy Reid credit. I know that he's never won the big game, and he's choked a lot in the championship games as far as those are concerned, but he literally has gotten the best out of his quarterbacks, whether it's been his quarterbacks or his running backs. You know, he's a very offensive, unique-minded. He's always a step ahead of the game. And for him to be able to revitalize a guy like Alex Smith in his career when he went to Kansas City was fantastic to watch. But Andy Reid definitely doesn't get enough credit in the NFL, I think, in my opinion. I think he's very underrated, especially by the fans, just because he's never won the big one.
Exactly, and that's like looking at Patrick Mahomes. With everything he did on the field this year, everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's because he went to the air raid system. He was at Texas Tech, and this is like, I'm pretty sure Andy Reid had a good chunk of help with that.
Patrick Mahomes would not have done what he did last year if it wasn't for him sitting behind Alex Smith for a year.
Exactly.
If he had started his rookie year, I don't think that we see that from Mahomes this past year. And I think also at the same time, like you said, Andy Reid was the perfect spot for him. Because what was one of the biggest knocks on Mahomes when he came out? His footwork. Go take a look at any of his throws in Texas Tech. I mean, he's throwing leaning to the left, throwing across his body. His arm is phenomenal. We all know that. But those are not throws that you would make in the NFL. And had he not gone to Kansas City and sat for that year,
probably doesn't happen at all.
There's no way that would have happened this year. I stand by that. As great as Mahomes was and is and will be, it sounded like Bret Hart right there, but as great as he will be, he will not. He would not have had that year as early as he did if he hadn't sat for that year and learned underneath Andy Reid and Alex Smith.
Exactly. Now, keeping it towards the Washington side of this, because now we have Dwayne Haskins taking over for Alex Smith, right? But then we have another rookie on the other side on the defense in Montez Sweat. How much pressure is that defense with Montez and everyone there going to be able to take off of Dwayne if he does start day one? I want to throw this to you, John.
Okay.
He's the Redskins fan.
Well, I'm a Redskins fan, too.
You know, we try not to say that publicly around
here.
here.
Exactly.
I mean, I know you're not from around here, but that's, not everybody's as proud as I am. But no, I think Sweat's in a good spot here. I mean, here's the reality. The Redskins, over the years, just go back the last 4 or 5 years, they've always been able to compile a lot of decent linebackers. And, I mean, hell, we just had the Zach Brown band here for the last 2 or 3 years. And, hell, he was up there with the league leading in tackles, 2 out of 3 of those years. He was right up there with Kuechly and all them guys that like to just tackle everybody. Fortunately, we're also good at tackling you after you get the first down in Washington. So, when you run up 30 to 36 a game on a team, your linebackers end up with a lot of tackles by the end of the whistle. So, but what he does have here, he's got Kerrigan, he's got a couple of, Anderson, the kid out of Alabama. I mean, they got 20 Alabama guys starting on the defense right now. So I don't know where they're going to put him between all the Alabama guys. And he's going to be playing on the outside. They just lost a free agent to Green Bay, one of McLuhan's picks. decent, bull rusher, outside linebacker. He's gone now, so he's going to be filling that void. But you've seen guys leave here and continue to have pretty good careers, and linebackers, we just seem to find them, whether it's off the free agency pile or it's out of the draft. We don't really honestly draft a whole lot of them in Washington. We like to waste our picks on other guys that never really pan out. But I think he's in a good spot here. He's got a hell of a defensive line playing in front of him, and if those guys stay healthy, well, then he's going to get all the opportunity in the world if he stays healthy to make a name for himself. And hey, they moved up in the first round to get him. If this were the Ravens moving up in the first round to grab a linebacker, they would expect you to start week 1, okay? And they would also expect you to go to the Pro Bowl 4 or 5 out of the next 7 years, because that's what they do in Baltimore. They draft you in the first round. You pan out or you are gone quickly. We've been known to hang around guys that play mediocre or slightly better and don't live up to their draft status here. But I have a good feeling about this guy. I don't know everything about his health history. I know that is a little bit of a concern, as is the guys, like I said, on the line that are playing in front of him. But man, oh man, the Redskins theme these last couple years is if these guys can stay healthy, they can compete with the majority of the teams in the league. They can try to climb in there, and go from that 50-yard line to that top third tier. They ain't going to be a top 6 team or a top 8 team in the NFL, but they can be 9 through 12, just as easy as they can go 7 and 9 like they normally do. So I like Sweat, Sweet, whatever his name is. If he works out, sweet. If he doesn't, hey, no sweat. It ain't my money. But I like the pickup. I like the aggressive move. They're not known for displaying brilliance during draft time, but I think they got this one right, and time will tell.
I want to touch. I want to throw in a couple things here. We discussed Alex Smith in Washington and stuff, and last year they had a winning record. They were 5-2, I believe, before he went down with the injury, or 6-2. They were in prime position in control of that NFC East before he got hurt. So the Alex Smith addition definitely did do wonders. A lot of that was also that defense. The mentality of that defense has changed over the last few years. Zach Brown, as much as I love the guy, he was such a liability in the passing game. He got toasted. He was a mismatch nightmare, and teams exploited it, especially when you have Zach Ertz on one side, you have Ezekiel Elliott coming into the backfield in Dallas. It caused issues for the Redskins down the stretch when that defense had to be on the field a little bit longer when the offense wasn't moving. But we lost in Smith, but Preston Smith was a guy, last year that kind of disappeared during games. But the mentality overall has been SEC football. It's been Bama. We've gotten Bama guys. We've gotten the hard-nosed, defensive-minded people to go in there and they just know how to win. And that whole mentality has changed, and it's starting to rub off on the field. Montez Sweat comes from Mississippi State. I don't know if you guys know much about Mississippi State or not, but Mississippi State's defense has been one of the best in the SEC for the last, 3-4 years. And they've even got themselves into a position of being a top 15 powerhouse team now. If they can get that.
State's always a powerhouse on defense.
Well, exactly. In the last 4 or 5 years, it's been even more so. Preston Smith came from Mississippi State, but he was a guy that might have been a little bit of a reach back when they drafted him 4 years ago. But Montez Sweat, he fell in the draft because of a misdiagnosis of a heart issue. Some said that his heart was too small or too big, or something with the heart. It was either too small or too big, and they were concerned about it. But it turned out there was about 12 teams in the NFL that cleared that heart condition, and Washington was one of them. They only gave up 2 second-rounders. I know I say only, but in the grand scheme of Washington's been known to trade, slide back into the first round, giving up only 2 second-rounders is relatively conservative for a guy like Daniel Snyder and Bruce Allen. So I think that they've learned from their past mistakes. They sat at 15, allowed Dwayne Haskins to fall. As a Redskins fan, I would have to say this is probably one of the best drafts in recent memory that I can think of, and that's from top to bottom, because even our third-round pick with Terry McLaurin, Calvin Harmon in the 6th, Bryce Love in the 4th. Like, we got ourselves set up for a good future if some of these guys can hit. All of them will. But, I like what the Redskins did. And Montez Sweat, to me, I mentioned it about Jeffrey Simmons of tackle from Mississippi State, that he could be the best defensive player in this draft. Montez Sweat can be top 3, in my opinion, for sure.
That's a pretty bold opinion. And I tell you what, we saw the Redskins take Fred Davis, Malcolm Kelly, and Devin Thomas in the second round. All 3 of them in the second round. In that same second round, they could have got who's the speedster that killed the Redskins on Monday night, catching long balls from either Michael. He ended up playing in Washington for a couple of years.
DeSean Jackson,
or who's the guy that played on the Packers forever and then went to Oakland last year for a cup of coffee.
Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, Jordy. Both of those guys were picked after all 3 of these guys that the Redskins took in the second round that year. So we're not so hot with the second rounders here in Washington. A lot of swing and a miss, just a bit outside. Could have left that one alone. But, we like to gamble with the second rounders. I think it's a good gamble. They re-signed that Matt Ioannidis. They've got Deron Payne up the middle. I mean, his name is scary alone. And then they've got the other Alabama player on the other side, the nice 3-4 defense. So they've got a nice little front 7 here. If they can stay healthy, put it together, I think they'll average a whole lot less than giving up that 4.8 or whatever they ended up giving up per carry last year when it was all said and done. And he'll be a big part of that.
Definitely. I kind of want to know, Isaiah Buggs, where did he go in the draft?
I think he went undrafted, or he got drafted in like the 7th round, but I think he ended up in Oakland. he slid down draft board. I think he ended up in Oakland.
Because I think the one thing that people missed about him, because Quinnen Williams was regarded as the best defensive lineman in this draft, right? The funny thing about it.
Yeah, I would say Quinnen. I mean, depends if you count Josh Allen or any of those edge rushers as defensive linemen or linebackers.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the 49ers are telling you to hold their beer right now.
Yeah, I mean, true. With Nick Bosa. But, the funny thing was, I was going into the draft and, looking up a couple of things. I was trying to get my feel for Quinnen Williams. So I watched a couple of videos on his tape, and then I watched a video because someone was saying that Isaiah Buggs was better than him. And I was just like, what are you talking? Who's Isaiah Buggs? And apparently, yeah, exactly. Before this year and everything, the year before that, Isaiah Buggs was actually the better defensive tackle than Quinnen. But because teams were double teaming him, it let Quinnen rise and be a star for Alabama. So I'm still trying to figure out how whoever got Isaiah, I feel like is going to have a solid pick. If it was 7th round, that's probably your best 7th round pick right there.
So you looked at tape from 2 years ago and you got bug-eyed.
I think my biggest issue with Isaiah Buggs was I just don't know where he fit in the NFL. Was he a 3-4? Was he a 4-3? Was he a 2 technique? Was he a 3 technique? Inside, outside guy? I don't think that he really has a true position. I think he's going to be a serviceable guy that can rotate in. I just don't see a star. With Quinnen Williams, I see a guy that just, when he comes off the ball, he could take somebody and drive them through, the library that's behind John right now. Like, he just put him right through that wall. It's just the way that Quinnen's been. He's just a strong dude who's fast. His technique is something that we haven't seen from a defensive tackle in a little while, probably since Leonard Williams, honestly, that the Jets also drafted. But I think with Quinnen, I think the reason why he started skyrocketing was because he got a little more exposure, because Buggs was, disruptive to a certain level. But Williams stood out on tape compared to Buggs. Buggs kind of, to me, just disappeared once in a while. And you don't want to see that when you're trying to watch a tape of a guy.
Another thing is that okay, so this guy was able to strut some stuff, Quinnen here. 6'3", 303. He fits the mold up in New York Jets. I mean, they had Snacks Harrison and Wilkerson, and they brought in Leonard. You know what I mean? I mean, they like the front side of their front seven a lot. Okay, and us three can get back there and play linebacker on the Jets and walk out of that game with 3 or 4 tackles. Before it's all said and done with that line playing in front of us. They really appreciate the run stuffing ability, guys that can still move laterally. At 603, this guy can move. Okay, so I can't really tell you a whole lot about Bugs. If he's multi-talented and you get lost in the shuffle, put him on a team, run by Bill Belichick, and he'll throw him out there for 12 plays a game, and he'll be a 9-play superstar every week. But up in the Jets, they really kind of hit it home with the defensive line there, and that's their identity. So, they took one of the guys that were the highest ranked on the board, and I can't blame them for that.
Oh, definitely, no doubt. It's just it was confusing to me that I saw all this stuff about Quinnen, but then I was starting to get more and more articles and like things that people were putting out about Isaiah Buggs, and I'm trying to figure out, I was like, why isn't he being talked about? Then I watched the tape and everything, the fact that this past year he was getting double teamed, so Quinnen was able to just be a star at that point. So I'm just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But I was like confused because I didn't like hear his name throughout the whole first through like 6 rounds. So I don't know if he went to the Oakland in the 7th. I think Oakland's got a good disruptor for the defensive line. It's just with what Michael said is true, if they have a second guy there, I think Isaiah will be able to not only get him looked at, but also being able to help out everyone around him.
A quick question.
Just to clarify real quick, John, Isaiah Buggs was actually drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the 6th round pick, the 192nd pick overall. Also, a little bit more about Buggs was he played at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College in 2015 and 2016, so he was a JUCO transfer.
Wow.
During his 2 years there, he had 134 tackles and 7.5 sacks. He then transferred to the University of Alabama. In his first year at Alabama in 2017, he started 13 of 14 games. He had 51 tackles and 1.5 sacks. The reason it looks like that Buggs may have dropped was actually because he had a late breakout year. Usually when you're looking at college players to translate to the NFL, guys that have a late breakout age, around the 22, 21, year-old range, 23 for some people, they don't tend to translate to the NFL as well because they're dominating against 18 to 19-year-olds. So that might be the reason why he slid down draft boards.
I mean, that would be fair, just because if he's a late bloomer, it could cause red flags for any team. But if he's on the Steelers, I think he'd do just fine.
Well, with the Steelers, they looks like they've got Ryan Shazier's replacement this year, and they're pretty good at drafting front 7 guys as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if, I don't pay as much attention to the offensive side of the ball as I do defensive. But man, when I see the Steelers drafting linebackers and defensive linemen, I just start salivating. When I close my eyes and I think the black and gold, I think tough. I think Steel Curtain, Wall. We're talking Kirkland, Green, Lambert. I mean, there's guys from every decade that you can name. My mother might be able to name 3 Steeler linebackers. So, when I saw that, the linebacker getting picked up, I said, well, that's Shazier's replacement. And that might be a sign that we might not see him. We know he was dancing at a wedding a couple weeks ago, and that's great. We're happy for him. Last thing we want to see is an anything, rolling around in a wheelchair. But, to know that he's back on his feet is fantastic. But and they're keeping him on the payroll now, Shazier.
I love what Pittsburgh's doing, by the way, with that. I love it. It's class. For all this Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown talk about how the Steelers
is the best.
Crap, this move makes me wonder how crappy that organization really is, because they don't have any obligation to Shazier to do that, and they're still doing it. I think it's fantastic.
They didn't need a Rooney rule to hire Tomlin either. Matter of fact, they invented one by just doing what they do. So, the Steelers, a lot of teams are playing checkers. Teams like Washington have been playing Hungry Hippos for a long time, and whatever. Bill plays chess, but the Steelers are one of those teams. the Steelers are one of those teams that are playing a different game. They're playing Mancala, or they're almost playing chess with Belichick. You know what I mean? I'd say they were, but they don't have the rings to show it. But I'm happy that they made a good move. You know what they were moved by the Steelers picking that linebacker reminded me of? It reminded me of the year that that Teddy Bruschi, they drafted Mayo, brought in these other linebackers, and Teddy Bruschi stayed on the team all the way up until the last preseason week, and then he announced his retirement. But what he did was show up to voluntary workouts, and he put in all the effort, and he got into the preseason with the young guys, and he really helped their technique and show them the Patriot way, the word that terminology a lot of people hate hearing. He truly did that. And then going in right before the season started, he said, you know what, I've had enough. I think these young guys are going to do fine. This is going to be a great team this year. It's been a hell of a ride. I'm out of here. And I think Shazier, that's the kind of feeling I got. I said, wow, this looks like a Teddy Bruschi type of situation for Shazier. He could just, move into some other position in the organization and kind of stick around, and help out in a different way than we're all hoping and expecting him to, Anyway, that's kind of feeling I got when I saw that. So back to your guy landing on the Steelers on the line. Hey, great team for him to land on. Great structure of an organization. You are right, Michael. They are just a star-studded outfit from top to bottom. Well, I don't even like the Steelers.
the thing with Shazier too is he really wants to play football again, and honestly, I honestly would rather him not. I would like to see him get out there and do, maybe a play, and then just retire after that, just to get out there and prove that he could do it. But that injury was scary. I'm glad that he's dancing at his wedding. And I would like to see him back in a uniform at least. I just don't know if I want to see him try to play a whole career again, because that would be scary every time he went to go for a tackle. It would be too nerve-wracking for somebody like me. I'm not even a Steelers fan, but just the fact that Shazier has that story, you have to pull for him.
I think maybe they'd be saving something like that for the final home game of the season.
Yeah, like week 17.
Like a Kyle Williams to give a little dump off pass to Kyle Williams at the end there,
Yeah, think about it though. They didn't.
Wonder why he wasn't at fullback all his whole career,
But I mean, they looked at Ryan Shazier. Everyone did. No one really expected him to be where he's at right now. They barely even expected him to walk again. The fact that he's dancing
months, Kevin?
It's been
18 months.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a year
maybe
and a half.
He got some of that deer antler spray from Ray Lewis.
Okay, come on. But
that stuff makes you heal fast.
True. But I mean, he did before he was dancing at his wedding. What was it, like a month or two ago? He was doing the I think it was 7 jump. Like he was jumping a box jump of 7.
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah.
He had help, but it was barely any help. He was just making sure he got off the ground, but he did it. So
I mean, think about last year at the draft. I mean, he walked out on stage. I mean, it didn't look really good, but compared to where he was, before, I mean, that was a fantastic moment in its own right with him walking on stage to do the pick there. I mean, this guy is determined. I
tell you what, and if the guy gets it okayed by a doctor, he's got to look no further than the guy that played on the other end of that linebacking core, and that's James Harrison. This guy is dragging around, aircraft carriers.
Oh, God, James Harrison.
He's doing it with roller skates on in the sand, I mean, this guy is like a Greek god chiseled from a different variety of adamantium. I can't really explain the guy, but,
I could see James Harrison at 80 doing this.
You know what? He probably is 80. He's just missing his birth certificate. He's probably a Dominican guy with a false birth certificate. Who knows? He's crazy.